Welcome everybody. We're back for another Seasons on Saturday session. I think this is either 10 or 11, but because we've done so many, it's been so successful. I've lost count. Last week's was an absolutely amazing session with Charlie Colello. And tonight, and morning, wherever you are, we have, first of all, we've got Lee Shapiro, who is the um, a star who's going to give us the information about what we want to know about about the album Who Loves You. And we've also got Chuck Walker, we've got Dominic Paradise, we've got Mike Derrico, and we've got not not last of all, but or least of all, Anthony Colatrella. So on to the session, and obviously we know this album was without doubt the most important in the careers of Bob Gaudio and Frankie Valli. And I say that without fear of challenge because its success worldwide was huge. It achieved number 12 in the UK album chart, yet surprisingly only number 38 in the USA. The sessions for the album started with the single Who Loves You on 30th of December 1974. And that session was led by Bob Gaudio and was completed with Joe Long still in the band. We know from Don Saccone's Billboard interview that he came to record the demo before Frankie returned to England to do the released version. And then the album sessions were done later, much later in November 75. So starting with that song, Lee, when did you first get to know that Bob Gaudio had a great song and wanted to record it as a single?
Well, everything from my knowledge prior to meeting Bob came through Frankie. So Frankie said, we're going to go out and we'll record a tune. And Bob wrote something and it's gotten, great reviews from the people he plays it for. Well, what the heck, man? This was 1974. I was 21. They could have told me anything. I'd have gone to record it. So I went out there. And at that time, the band was not doing fantastic, or Bob and Gaudio, their production company, was not doing that well financially. I learned afterwards. I didn't know. And we went up into the Hollywood Hills where Bob had a home that he was renting, from what I understand. And he picked me up in his XKE, the big long nose. And we drove up there, and I'm already kind of looking around, pinching myself. And we go downstairs and he plays me the tune. And I'm like nodding and popping. And I went home. I hated it. I said to myself, again with this chord pattern, 1-6-2-5, it's the same as Sherry. I was a bit of a jazz snob at the time because I was used to all the substitute chords. Then we did a rehearsal. And when we did a rehearsal, it started to really become a recordy sounding thing. So I was kind of way into it. And Joe Long had played the bass on it. And Gaudio was very unhappy with it. He felt that it was low-key and not as sharp as the rest of the track. So it wasn't long after that I was asked to terminate Joe Long. 21-year-old Lee Shapiro is going to terminate 40-year-old Joe Long, who was there playing in the 60s. Of course, that's how Frankie did things. So meanwhile, I did, and it wasn't good, but nonetheless, I did it. And they sent Joe packing, and Don Saccone came in to play bass on Who Loves You with what he was able to play and own. A Fender or a Music Man 6-string bass. And he played the 6-string bass, and it sounded great. Same part that.
Are you saying, Lee, that Joe's bass line isn't the one we hear on
No,
because in all of the stories that have been published since, it's Joe Long's last recording on release. It was his last recording, but it wasn't on the release single.
No, what ended up happening was Don played 6-string bass.
Wow.
And then to add the extra, sonic sense of a heavy bass, he doubled the entire, Gaudio doubled the entire bass with a synthesizer. Dun, 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 dun. It leads, the bass is in front, but the whole low end of it on a 6-string bass isn't the same as a big, booming Fender bass. And so that was made up for with, and also if you listen to Who Loves You, the bass part isn't particularly a bass player's dream. It's a good, great bass part, but it's a bass part as part of a rhythm section record song. It's, you know what I mean? So that saying, it was easy to double and beef it up and make it sound great. And then while we were further rehearsing, a disco version was needed. And that was very exciting for everybody because they played the single version, which, believe it or not, was mixed first. I think that we had recorded the longer version. But we were in rehearsal, and Gaudio said to me and Jerry and Don, and I think even John at that point, we need a middle part. We need like a dance thing. We need something like this because it's going to be an extended version. And Don said, impromptu, off the top of his head, what about something like this? Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Verbatim, what I'm singing is what he played.
Yeah.
And Gaudio looked at him. That's kind of cool. Yeah. Okay. Let's work with that. And basically, Don wrote it. Period. And then Gaudio inserted it and dressed it all up with well and all that stuff, and basically became that long version. And
one of the surviving tapes that we found doing the box set, which is out yesterday, is that there was a rough mixes tape, and on it there's a few mixes of Who Loves You, either partial or complete, and then there's a completed version with Don's vocal on it. Now, presumably this is all done on 24 track, and so at that stage, that was just a rough mix to see how it sounded with a vocal on it.
Correct. Don was never intended or considered to sing it. It wasn't part of the thing. That first one was with Frankie. Then they got the idea, of course, and we'll get to it another night, to mix it around so that there could ultimately be a separation that didn't work. But for Who Loves You standpoint, there were many aspects of the record that, although the stories have been told over time, that and I have no regrets at all, and I'm thrilled with the way the stars aligned, and I got to be one of the Four Seasons, and it's all great. However, we were doing actually prior to Don figuring out what the whole middle part should be and all that. Prior to that, we were putting together the format of the song, and we were in Gaudio's basement, and he had an upright piano down there. And we got to the bridge, and the bridge went from A, "We love you, pretty baby," and then went ha, and that went to F sharp minor. Well, in F sharp minor, I mean, it sounded good, except that F sharp minor presented itself as a key where the melody Gaudio had written, nobody could sing it. It was like a fourth too high. Nobody, I mean, Steve Perry couldn't have sung it. It was out of range. It was out of range. So Gaudio's frustrated, and he thought, sure, one of the guys would be able to do it. He said, let's take a break, and they all went upstairs for coffee. I don't say this story to put a feather in my cap. I'm telling it's what happened, you know. So they went upstairs, and I'm screwing around. Again, it never dawns on me that I'm screwing around with a song written by a guy who wrote Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. It doesn't even occur to me. I'm just playing what I think, just like I did at home at Glenrock. And it occurs to me that if instead of going, they're hot, like, who loves you, that's what he had. When tears are, and it goes, I don't know it. So I didn't, I went, who loves you, So from A to A minor, for those of you that have an idea, A to A minor, which keeps it in the same range, as opposed to A to F sharp minor, which brings it up a sixth. So I did it. Well, it worked out great, but I noticed at the end of it, I ended up in G, key lower than the song started. But lucky me, when I went from G to get back to the new key, A, it sounds like the song keeps going up another key, but it's modulating back into itself where it was. So by being in A minor, it leads us to G. Who loves you? Then it goes, who loves you? Well, that sounds like it's going up. And it does go up, but it goes up into the key it started in. So it never gets out of range. Probably my most clever arranging moment to this stage of my life to date, having no idea where it came from. Yes.
I wanted to clarify, did you say, I thought the original version had Don Ciccone as lead vocal, but I thought you just said that, no, it was Frankie.
No,
the original vocal, the Don's vocal was a guide. It was never for anything other than for Frankie to lead.
Right. But he did record it, the original.
Oh, yes, first. Yeah, absolutely true.
Well, there's a story that Mike Kerb wanted to hear a demo of the song. He wanted to know what was going on, and that demo was supplied with Don on it.
That's correct.
For him to listen to, and he liked it so much.
Well, and when Mike Kerb loved it, that's when Frankie got involved. In other words, they didn't want to play something for Mike Kerb that if he didn't like it, Frankie was on it. So better to throw Don out there as a scout. Oh, I love the song, man. Well, who's going to sing this? Is this the guy, or are you going to do it, Frankie? And of course, once a record label president likes a master, there's no chance anyone's going to sing it other than Frankie.
Yeah, well, Frankie's vocal was immaculate, and
it was perfect. It was exactly what this. Look, one thing about Frankie, and Sandy Linzer's even said it to me. He says, I love what I did for Frankie. I love crew. I love everybody. But one thing that we all had together, we all had Frankie. We don't know why that voice was the magical, magnetic voice that it was, but it was. And once he sang something, it sounded like a hit, even if it wasn't. Just like crew. Once you were in the room with crew, you were sure you were making a hit. So to have Crew and Colello and Frankie all in the same room making a record, you can imagine how I felt.
Yeah. Well, last week, we were talking to Charlie about, and obviously in doing 24 tracks, you had the opportunity to put a string sweetening on it, and you told us about that last week. But then all of these 24 tracks, must have generated, first of all, Bob Gaudio sitting down to mix what was going to be a single and make a hit of it, and then the B-side, which was going to be a disco version. So obviously he was aware of the club scene and Crew's involvement with that.
Of course.
And that was a deliberate decision made with Kerb, presumably.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
But were you involved in the disco mixing of it, or was it?
Are you talking about in the 90s?
No, the disco mix that was done.
Yes. Oh, yes. I was. First of all, none of the band was involved in any mixes. Gaudio didn't want anybody in the room when he mixed.
Right.
Understandably, because there were things that I would have said that might have gotten me fired.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there were two stories I wanted to tell about Charlie that I didn't get the opportunity to tell. Let's tell them quickly. At the Eyes Adore You session, I'm in the session with, and I make a suggestion. Charlie looks at me, and he takes me over into the corner. I might have told you this before, Ken. And he says to me, Lee, you need to do two things. I said, what's that? He said, sit in that chair and keep your ears open and your mouth shut. And it stung. It stung. I was a kid. But I listened. And the best lesson I ever heard in my life. The benefit of that formed my career by knowing the protocol and being able to sit in on Manilow sessions or anybody's, knowing that I wouldn't be the disruptor. And the second story I want to tell quickly. Last week we were talking about how I felt that Charlie's beginning of Eyes Adored You, beginning of Swear to God, all that's those aren't arrangements. That's composition. He should have been compensated. I mean, when you hear do 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 ding dong, you know what song that is in two notes. You know it. That should have been a royalty situation. It was not. And then I made the example. It's just like when you hear Sweet Caroline, ba ba ba. And then I looked the record up, and do you know who arranged that record? Charlie Colello.
It says that, does it? Yeah.
I'm using it as an example. Had no idea to credit him with it. And after we were all done, I looked it up, and it's arranged by Charlie Kalua.
Well, he has said,
Another hit lick, another hook.
but he never got to work again. Okay, staying with
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
staying with that and the disco arrangement, and the release of the song, and it being a massive hit. You know, the situation in the studio was, well, you were out on the road and you were promoting the song by then.
Yes.
And the question suddenly struck me today. Well, did Gaudio already have the songs that were going to go into the album, or was it a case of frantically writing everything in the lead up to the session?
It was that. Because that's why, well, Who Loves You? That's why when I'm talking about having changed the key relationships and all that, the songs were under construction, all of them. None of them were finished.
Yeah.
Which explains a lot about Oh What a Night, and the flappers on the floor, and the whole prohibition concept, and being able to pull it apart, put it back together again. And basically, for instance, the first entrance of the bass on Oh What a Night comes in the middle of a vocal line. That was never supposed to be. It was supposed to be that's where the vocals started. But he changed the song and kept the track. So when it came in the middle, one thing about Gaudio, he knows when something is working, whether it was originally intended or not.
Okay, hold that thought, Lee, because let's go to the start of the sessions. And
I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, we don't have John with us, and I haven't been able to contact him or get any.
I have for what it's worth.
And I don't know how he is, but
Not great.
we wanted him on this session, but he'll be around, and we can revisit things with him again. But when I've spoken to him about the first track one, which was on the UK album as track one, Silver Star, he said to me that, and this fits with the question of how did Bob manage the sessions with you as individuals in the group, and with you all contributing to the final sound. But John said to me that Bob brought the songs which were always started on the piano. They were always simple 3-chord pop songs, and we all just played them as we interpreted them. So Silver Star was an organic generation by the group, was it?
The format of the song is all audio. The format where it's fast part and slow part, and then it goes to the whole halftime. That was all preconceived. What everyone plays, Gaudio, as John said, Gaudio started showing us a song with the piano part, which is and off it went. The fact that it was a guitar-oriented feel, Gaudio knew that, but he also knew that that's what he would play if the guitar was already there, because he's not exactly without talent. He has great ears. But John was in a different position, let alone mindset. And we created those records and then put the guitars on last.
Right.
So, in other words, it was. I didn't play on the basic tracks either. The basic tracks were played by Gaudio on piano, Jerry on drums, and Don on bass. Those 3 instruments played every song.
Right.
Then,
so in the 24-track makeup, that was the way Bob approached it. He played out. He set out the piano.
Well, what we would do is there'd be 10 tracks of drums, stereo track of bass, stereo track of piano. So you're up to 14 tracks, and then either have a slave 24 track that linked together with the old Synthi time code from the film world, or you do a 2-track mix of your rhythm. And now you have 22 tracks open again.
Right.
So what would happen is that basically this still holds true. If it doesn't sound like a hit with piano, bass, and drums, or guitar, bass, and drums, so with a little nucleus, then it's never going to sound like a hit.
No, it hangs together. Well, that's 4 Seasons. It always has been done that way.
You don't dress. You can't, as we say in our business, you can't polish a turd. It remains a turd. So the bottom line is that when John would walk in the studio, he was overdubbing.
Yeah.
The group was there. On the other hand, he seemed to be, nonplussed about it. I'm going to come in and play what he tells me to play. I would have said to him that I had my sensibilities now instead of being a neurotic kid like I was. I would say to him, John, approach it like it's the opportunity of a lifetime, because it is. Whether you like the music, whether you like the songs, and whether you like Bob, approach this like it's the opportunity of a lifetime. It's the same thing. It's the same thing at 20 years old that I told Dimitri Callis when he left.
Yeah, but it's multiple 12-string guitar rhythm.
John's great. He's great. He's not a great guitarist in the way George Benson is a great guitarist, but he's a great guitarist in the way Crosby, Stills, and Nash does their tracks. He's that kind of great, and he also can play. He also can play kind of Wes Montgomery-ish. But the point is, he did a beautiful job. But he already was like intimidated by Gaudio, and Gaudio would tell him to do something, and he couldn't get it, so Gaudio would grab the pick and strum it, and all of this drew John deeper into his shell, if you will. But he still managed to come across with exactly what was needed. He took direction well, and he created things well. But from the standpoint of what John played and what I played on Hammond organ, or what I wrote on the orchestrations, or any of that stuff, or Richard Gahate on percussion if he was playing, all of that, we did what the hell we wanted, because Gaudio couldn't start from zero in those areas. He couldn't start, and he couldn't say, well, the strings will come in here. He couldn't do that. He couldn't say, play an up thing on the, he couldn't do that. He could sing it to you. So what was great for me, and Who Loves You, which is where we started this story, I was 23, I believe, on the sessions, and they had the track done, the trio track, as we know.
Yeah.
Said. And I wrote these strings, and I wrote them in a hotel room with no piano. I mean, I'm like a big shot. I look back now, I said, what are you, out of your mind doing that with this kind of a legacy of a group? But I did it. And of course, I had already become a student of Charlie Coelho, having met him a year before and knowing all his work and admiring just everything the man did. And topping it off with My Eyes Adore You and hearing his screenwriting.
Yeah.
I'm a sponge. I assimilated it. So when I wrote Who Loves You, I knew I had been thrown in the water, but I knew I was swimming when we finished the session. And I'm standing in front of the strings. At one point, I forgot to tell Gaudio to roll tape. I'm standing there and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And it occurred to me, I have to say it. Okay, roll tape. So they rolled tape, and we recorded the strings.
You had the benefit of the sessions we talked about last week when you were working with crew, and so you'd had that strong session in the studio in your head. So
it was such a profound influence. It was,
and we've got no idea of the master session and the order in which you did the song, so we've only got the album to follow. But the track that follows, Silver Star, which was
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Keep guiding me along, Ken.
Yeah, it was a huge hit in the UK, and I think it was a huge hit because it was built on the performances that you put on in the UK, and the fact that the fan club became very strong all of a sudden, but it didn't seem to strike the same. We'll come back to the US and UK markets at the end if we can. But moving on to Storybook Lovers, I was listening to it today in the car driving, and it's such a sweet and gentle melodic song, and a simple rhythm backing, but it's classic Four Seasons. So who conceived this sort of nostalgic arrangement? It was a Bob Gaudio, Judy Parker song. So
Storybook Lovers, the nostalgia was in the lyric. It was there.
Yeah.
So that's why I had such wonderful opportunities to learn. I met Don Costa, Frank Sinatra's orchestrator, one of them. And in sitting with him and Frankie Valli at the Flamingo, Frankie said to me, Lee, you should take a tip from Don's arranging. That's like, Lee, you should take a tip from Mozart over here. You know, it look, in retrospect, I'm pinching myself now. And I said, why is that? What do you do? He said, I never orchestrate anything until I understand the lyrics. Changed my life.
Yeah.
Changed my
So
life.
the lyric "Happy Endings Make Me Cry" is a cornerstone of that song. It very nearly became a single, according to information we had at the time. It's quite a beautiful song, and it's by far the softest song that the group did, apart from one we'll come to later.
The songs that I orchestrated for Gaudio, I didn't know at the time, but in listening to them back, I feel like we were a good team. And if I had been more self-confident, I would have known then we were a good team, because he never changed a note of anything I ever did. Not a note. And what I did went on the record. And I didn't understand the compliment that was, because Gaudio is such a wet fish and has no personality per se. But be that as it may, though, looking back on it, we were a good. The second team was. We were. Nothing will ever be as good as Charlie said. Charlie, Crew, Gaudio, Frankie, Denny Randell, and Sandy Linzer. That's the Four Seasons right there. But second to that would be Gaudio, me, Frankie, Don, John, Jerry, and then of course no one could ever rule out Crew. Crew's a better producer dead than most people are while they're living. He was an untouchable talent. But what I'm saying is that I felt that we did well the second time around for a number of reasons, but one of the main ones, here, number one and number tied for 1 and 2, the song and Frankie Valli. What can you say? Okay.
Lee, moving on to the next track, which is a very nostalgic arrangement as well, Harmony, Perfect Harmony. This is without doubt the one place where you guys had the chance to do open harmony. And I want to ask you a little bit more, because we talked about that last week with Charlie, and he's talked about it before with the original Four Seasons. So in terms of the blend of your harmonies, I suspect that it was multiple vocal layers, one over the other, to build it up to an intensity. But how about the keys that Charlie was talking about last week? How did you guys manage that?
Gaudio, although he probably disagree with me if he were on this cast, but his voicings of who sang what and the intervals that were used to make the chords was the same as it always was, as he learned from Massey also. The Four Seasons sound, I'll try one more time because Charlie was having trouble with his keyboard and he couldn't see his hands. But so let's see if you can see my hands.
Yeah.
This is closed harmony. C, E, G, E, C, ba, da, 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 da. Okay?
Yeah.
This is open harmony. Da, da, dee, da, da, dee. You take the E out of the middle and move it all the way up top, and you got open harmony. So it looks like this: C, G, E instead of C, E, G. Am I demonstrating it?
Yeah.
Clearly?
Yeah.
So the Four Seasons sound always has a gap on the bottom. So if it's a C and there'd be an E right there available to sing, they skip that and go to the G. So now you have an open C, G. Now there's 4 people, but there's only 3 notes. So they double the C, which is the next one, and they put the third on the top. And the third is the note of a chord that determines whether it's major or minor. Da, 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 da is the third, da, da, da. Here's the third as a minor. Da, da, da. So it's da, 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 da. So by putting that note on the top, what determines the minor and the major, the happy and the sad, if you will, of the chord is now on top. So you've got it resonating with the pivotal note on top. Ooh, ragdoll.
Yeah.
The third is ooh, ooh. That's the third above it. And that's why it gets real thick. Now you double it and you triple it. And especially at the time when you had 24 tracks instead of 2, and we put one left, one right, one up the middle, and you got 19 people singing.
Yeah.
sounds huge.
Yeah, and it certainly set your every group has unique voices, but when you combine it in harmony, you get a different result, whichever lineup you've got, because they're all different voices.
Right, but some of the biggest vocal sounds in the industry came from people who were related to each other, whether it be Tavares or the Everly Brothers, or I mean, there's just Sly and the Family Stone. There's just so many. And when family members, the Beach Boys, sing together,
The Carpenters.
they're breathing as one. So the likelihood of having the Four Seasons, none of them schooled singers. Frankie just a natural gifted man, and the other ones just like them and these and those kind of guys who could carry a tune, to do it once and then to reassemble it years later with three other guys who don't know each other and have that sound good is rare. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. But
the Beatles are the most unique of all. Four unrelated, friendly guys, each one an amazing lead singer with a recognizable sound, even to the point that although Ringo didn't have a great vocal sound, he, like Dr. John, like James Brown, they had a sound. You know who it was right away. Yeah. So anyway, I'm digressing again. So please.
No, but in that song, what I'm saying and what seems to stand out on the album is, and from previous discussions we've had, that was the new Four Seasons harmony sound.
Well said. Well said.
And coupled with that, you had John's brilliant middle section, which just rises and rises and rises, and then drops back down into the vocal. You never did that in concert, though, did you?
You did it in England, I think. No, I'm thinking of Rhapsody. My mistake.
No, you did. You did that. No, but anyway, moving on to track 4 and Emily's Salda Dance. You know, this was a complete departure from anything before.
This is the one I want to know about.
Yeah, so this was a real party rock style song with a great opening vocal by Don and a strong guitar, horns and piano running through it, and a real club style arrangement. And there's an improv outro, which Gaudio let you do. So how did that, Lee? How did you hit that track in a different way? Because you're all partying on it.
That, I have to say, speaking for myself, I didn't get the concept when Gaudio played it. Gaudio wanted to do. Gaudio always wanted to. Gaudio's success is based on the fact that he was never afraid to make a fool of himself. Never. And you got to be willing to do that to have a hit. You got to swing the bat, and you got to strike out and fall down and get hit by the ball. And Gaudio had no reservations about putting his own creativity out there.
Yep.
And obviously he had a reason for that. And nobody hits it out of the park every time. I didn't get it, but I knew that it was French. And so I went from there. It's French. And let's see, I used to play on the accordion under Paris Skies. I remember that. And so I called on my vast life experience at 22. And but I will tell you that Emily, does anyone here know who Emily is?
No.
Would you like to know who Emily is?
Oh, please, yes.
Judy Parker's daughter that she basically disenfranchised when she married Gaudio.
Oh, right.
And I believe she was, not positive, but I believe she might have been a little handicapped. So she had to go somewhere. That's who Emily was. But Emily Salda Dance in Emily's dance salon, if you will.
Well, certainly a great song. And there's a UK edit in the box set, which actually starts with you all partying and then runs into the body of the song, which I particularly like. So thanks for that, Lee. But then on the other side of the album, we kick off with Jerry's masterpiece, Mystic Mr. Sam.
Probably the worst song I've ever heard. Up there with Street Fighter. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so it was a very strange song, and it seemed
Terrible.
to be like a revisit to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, but not in the same way.
No, in a worse way. what he
Well,
was doing.
Oh, it was
Gaudio-
Don. It was
Gaudio
Don's.
was-
Don
Sorry.
Saccone, not Jerry. That was Don.
Don's. It was Don's vocal. I'm sorry, my mistake.
Yeah.
Um,
Gaudio's downfall, in my opinion, no downfall. Gaudio's lack of success with certain tunes were the ones when he was chasing something that was already out there. So the whole Mystic Mr. Sam was the whole thing with, like, you know, Blue Meanies and all of that kind of stuff, you know, and he never did it as good as the original. As an example, Silly Love Songs by Paul McCartney. So
Yeah.
Gaudio wrote Down the Hall. Now, if you play the two songs together, starting from the beginning at the same time, they're the same tune.
Yeah.
It never works. Just like Veronica is Gloria, is
You mean
Gloria by Laura Branigan.
that
There's nothing
number
to
one
discuss.
hit. Number one hit that Charlie thought they had.
Today, both of those songs would be a lawsuit today.
Hmm.
And frankly, most of the lawsuits today are very frivolous. Certain songs don't sound like Marvin Gaye, who just has a very litigious family. But anyway, moving on.
You guys just threw it together then, with horns and strings came in to lift it up. It's a throwaway.
Yes.
Okay, but the next song on the album certainly wasn't a throwaway, and obviously, as soon as anybody put the album on, it was the star track on the album, '1 in the USA and in the UK in January 1976, and it had repeated success in 1988 and again in 1994 in remixes. So we know some of the stories behind it, but I'm sure there's stuff you can still tell us, Lee. We know about the flip-flopping on the floor and the
Yeah. Ask me a question. What would you like?
well, when Bob Gaudio came back with the revised lyric the next day, how did you guys cope with that? Because clearly it's about a guy losing his virginity, and it's a tribute to the male orgasm. It's
Yes, and what first of all, we'd have preferred anything to what it was, but there was a couple of feelings about it. When he brought it back, we were relieved greatly that it was about having sex for the first time or whatever it was. And we can figure that if Gaudio was born in 43 and it's December, in the 60, or 30, whatever the hell it is, the age is worked out and we get it. But Don and I, who in those days we roomed together because the money was still not happening, we were kind of despondent. Like, how come of the 4 seasons in our meeting with Gaudio to discuss this horrendous lyric, flappers flipping on the floor, and he fought us on it tooth and nail, nothing but pushback, yelling, really yelling, and comes back the next day with it all rewritten. Didn't tell us he was going to rewrite it. We left with him being all pissed off. And then I said, Don, without you, and of course I was Don's partner in crime, and I also had a big mouth, so I chimed in. I agree with Don. It was badly written. How come you didn't ask us to help him? He knows you're a lyricist. At least you, I said to Don, because Don had it in record with Dying of Sad in '66. And we looked at each other. It's like, yeah, he was a kind of a you're second-class citizen kind of guy. And then I fucking arranged the thing, and Saccone came up with the bass part, which was doing it. I mean, it was brilliant bass part, brilliant. And
that was it. But you had one other thing to sort out, and that is, how do you finish it? And so how did the do closing?
All Gaudio. We didn't never. First of all, doot started in Who Loves You, baby, baby, doot, come to me. So it was Gaudio's concept, and shows his acumen as a producer to continue that theme in another tune.
Yeah.
The doots that were unison in Who Loves You became vocal chords of doots in Oh What a Night. And we thought they were silly. But again, when you're working with Gaudio, even though I was a wise ass and didn't understand the value of working with a guy of that magnitude, it kind of got the feeling that we just showed up and let the guy do his thing. Because I hadn't been asked to be in a 24-track, $1 million an hour studio to make records by anyone else. So I was very reverent in that area. But that is all, I have no problem telling you and giving Gaudio his props.
So do you think, Lee, that this was really by accident and as a result of the fallout in the evening and going back to see Judy and thinking again, that was Gaudio's biggest masterpiece? Because from what you're saying and from what we hear on the record and the success of it, it seems as though it was.
It's the biggest hit in the history of the band. And it's because and he would never acknowledge this, but it was the one he took input on.
Yeah. And 3 vocalists.
Well, that was designed not because it was creatively wonderful, which it was. That was designed for strictly
key changes.
More than that, Kenny. It wasn't a musical decision. It was a career decision so that they would have Pulci's voice established and Don's voice established on record so that they could make a solo career for Frankie out of Greece in '78. That was always the desire, is to separate into 2 entities. Yeah. One would be Frankie on my curb, on Warner's curb, and the other would be on Warner Brothers Records with Mo Austin or
Warner Brothers and Private Stock, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Private Stock and Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And they went after that on a calculated business decision, which died. And what it ended up being, well, as you all know, it went back to being Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. And since those days, which would be '79 to '78 was the Frankie tour. From '79 to the present, the font on the Four Seasons went from 42 pixels to about 8 pixels. So now it's Frankie Valli and the eye chart Four Seasons.
Yeah. So, we know the success of that song. And
can I get a couple questions in?
Sure, please.
Check it out there. Sure.
First of all, the comment that Bob took it back and rewrote it that night. I've also heard stories that Judy Parker is actually the one who rewrote the lyrics from December 1933.
Yeah, that's not
'63. Which is correct?
The correct way is that Gaudio does everything, and then when he's stuck, he refers to who he's working with. And
okay,
she didn't start it. If anything, and I mean if anything, she's the one that, when they scrapped the lyrics, started out with making it about a boy's first experience. To my knowledge, Gaudio would like it to be known that Gaudio saved his ass, and I mean that Judy saved his ass, and my sense of it is that it was the song that caused a rift between Frankie that lasted many years, because they're supposed to split everything 50-50. But Gaudio told Frankie that he couldn't give him 50-50 because Judy got a third. So he screwed his own partner and childhood friend to give money to his wife that obviously went into his pocket.
Well, obviously this happens a lot in music, and we can realize that Judy's role in all of these songs is somewhat peripheral, but it was there.
And you had another, and he had one more question. What was the other question?
The other question is, with the 3 different releases of December '63, the original, the '88, and the '94, my understanding is that song still has the record of number of weeks on the Billboard Top 100. Is that correct?
I believe
it did at one time.
Yeah,
it did at one time. I don't know if it still does. One of these rap songs might have replaced it.
But I will tell you though, the song that keeps getting recorded and makes if you had written no other song of all the songs, Beggin' has been released and become a hit at least 5 times in different markets, whether it's rap or Euro pop or what, over and over. And frankly, the least good one to me is the original, because the time, I'm a musician, so the time is floating all over the place. But in those days, if it felt good, it was good. So they released it. It was a huge hit. But the versions that have come since then, with the rap in them and the other things and the ethereal melody, so great. So great. I mean, Gaudio just, like I say, the guy, say what you will, he has it. Whatever it is, he has it.
67.
So
Dom,
whilst-
I see Dom has a question.
Ahead of its time.
But let me call on someone else.
yeah, let's see. Whilst we're on, before we must finish the album, but before we leave December '63,
Yeah, was 63 written for Frankie's part to be in it? Because I think it could have been a hit without it.
They put it in there as a safety valve. They put it in there as an insurance policy. Because
Hey, no.
well, they did because if it's someone saying where's Frankie, and then he comes in, it's like, oh, thank goodness, at least we got to prove an entity. It's not a complete risk. Which just that could have not worked, but it did. It wasn't like, oh, I know this will be great. Every trial and error. Let's put this here. Let's put that there.
I heard Don Ciccone gave an interview. This is sort of related to the story you were telling, that he was the one who challenged Gaudio about the lyrics.
He was.
At that point, Frankie Valli agreed that the lyrics were bad. And he said, Don Ciccone writes lyrics. Give him, a chance to write lyrics for it. And Gaudio said, no, I'll do it. And, went away and came back with the new
I know that story, but I don't know it because Frankie told it to us or anyone else at the time. All we knew was that the next day came and there was no lyric.
Well, it was Rex Woodard who told that story, and Rex passed away in 1991, so we'll never know. But okay, any more questions on December '63? Mike Derrico, hand up.
Oh, I had my hand up for a different song. I wanted to go back to Emily, but
Okay, go on. Go back to Emily. Go on.
all right. So, Lee, to my ears, the last 2 minutes of that song is the most adventurous the band ever gets in its entire history. Progressive, if you will. Who's behind that decision? Like, what prompted him to totally let you guys unleash at the end of that song?
We'll never know, but I know that it's likely two things. One, Gaudio didn't have a sense of what he wanted to do, so he wanted to just hear things. Bob Crew used to produce like that. He would go in and say, play a groove on the drums, play something for me. But no, do the gig. Gave him a bouncing off place. So that's number one. And number two, Gaudio was trying to establish that we were a band, that it wasn't the Four Seasons with a studio band or Frankie with a studio band and, prefabricating tracks. He wanted us to be a band. We were a band. So he let us be a band at that point.
He wanted you to have a rock theme behind the other talents that you had.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you went out on tour and did a great tour worldwide, but the track that seemed to settle the audience down and make everybody feel spiritually together was Slip Away, which wasn't a Gaudio composition. I don't know where it came from, but Don carried that vocal and had the confidence to carry that vocal. And it just seemed another great, well, all the tracks are great, but another standout that always went down brilliantly in concert.
Don didn't want to sing it like that.
Yeah,
Didn't he?
sings it.
Don didn't want to sing it with that whole rough.
Hoarse voice.
He didn't want to sing it like that at all. He doesn't sing like that. But Gaudio, in my opinion, overproduced him into that voice, which ended up being a viable sound, and it went well. Don never liked it. He hated it. It was the whole raspy thing and the feeling. He felt ingenuous.
It wasn't the true Don, you mean?
It had nothing to do with what Don sounds like. Don sang. I would say that Don. Well, if you would listen to Mr. Dyingly Sad, that's Don. And
Yeah.
he sang like that right up until the day I said goodbye.
Well, I know it's a bit of a side issue, but we have surviving 4 tracks that Don wrote and recorded with you guys in the round, which survived on one of John's cassettes. And that seems to be Don being Don. They're not in the box set. They're not part of.
And honestly,
Yeah.
Don being Don, producing himself,
Yeah.
is a disaster. He doesn't know how to play his own instrument.
When he's producing, you mean?
When he's producing his own vocal, he doesn't play his own instrument as well as he plays it when I'm producing it with audio or, no, I don't like that song, except the way it sounded, but because Don was a very calculating, very rule-oriented, premeditated kind of guy looking for, everything was cerebral. And I remember producing his vocal at one point and saying to him, Don, in 10 seconds, I'm going to roll the track again. No thinking, just sing. No thinking, none, 0. If you don't like it, we'll erase it.
He wasn't being instinctive to himself.
And he had it. But I guess, look, he had a hit record in '66.
Yeah.
And he wrote it, he was like 20 years old. Then he hadn't written a hit record in decades. And so I guess, he was thinking, what do I do? What did I do before? And I said to him, man, you have an instrument. Your sound is more important than the notes you sing. I mean, it's nobody cares. Like, for instance, Elton John, it's a little bit funny. You're in. You're all in. You know him, you know the sound. Don had that in his own way, but he didn't believe it. And I used to say to him, Don, stop figuring out what you're singing and doing curly cues. Sing the melody of the song and sing it like it's your name and sing it. And just, if you sing it bad in some places, just keep going. Don't get so. And a couple of times he actually did it and it sounded great. The reason that he had the hit, I believe, first of all, his song was great. But also back then, I think he did 2 takes and that was the end of it. You know what I mean? And I think I've spoken to Jimmy Ryan, who, by the way, Jimmy Ryan played bass on that record. But
right.
Yeah.
So Slip Away was another throwaway track, in a way, a bit of a filler for the album, but
it was an album cut, we call it.
Yeah, an album track. So a great album, which stood up at the time, and you were going to go out on tour and present it. We'll move on to what happened as a result of the album, and that was that you did a great tour, and you were hugely received, and we were ecstatic in the UK. And I first saw you in Southport Theatre on the 16th of April, the following year after the release, and you became, as Dom has said, and really cast you as, you were our 4 seasons. So but you only did 4 tracks from the album, and the rest of it was the Frankie Valli show. So,
well, it had to be, because man had 22 and hit top 5 records. Someone's going to be disappointed if you do the new song from the album and you don't do Candy Girl. I mean, even though we were the new 4 seasons, if you will, it was still the 4 seasons music was Marlena and Sherry, and there were so many of those. Dawn, Over 17, Save It For Me, you can go forever. So
to follow it up, you ended up doing a Beatles number, We Can Work It Out.
And the only reason we did it was because we did it in the movie All This in World War II.
Yeah.
And the movie had just come out, so we were helping to promote the movie, and they had released that record as a single. But had there been no movie, there had been no Beatle cover.
Right. Okay. Well, so then, we've talked before about comparing Helicon and Who Loves You albums. And when you listen to them in a combined play, it emphasizes the degree of change in the arrangement, production, and mixing between the 2 albums. Helicon lacks the horns and strings so dominant in Who Loves You tracks, and to many, that was the cornerstone of the success. It sounded good, it caught our ears. Surely building on this album sound and the harmony styling that, like we said, in perfect harmony, was a new 4 season sound. And wasn't that established by the success of the singles?
Yeah. Well, that's why when they were going to go carry on as the Four Seasons without Frankie, and they asked me, do you want to be Frankie's musical director? Or do you want to be in this new Four Seasons without Frankie? And without a pause, I said, I want to go with Frankie. And they said, really? You don't want to be in a new band that's going to be coming up with the records and stuff? So now I'll go with the Proven Entity.
You said what? You said what?
I'll go with the Proven Entity.
Yeah.
Because I knew Frankie Valli was succeed. I knew it. But this whole new venture that might happen that I had no creative control over. If I'm not going to have a creative control, I'd rather go with the guy that's got hits already. You know, because I wouldn't be able to say, no, man, that ain't right. Don't do that. That wasn't going to be part of my role. And
Yeah.
I didn't want that.
Yeah, well, subsequently, I mean, obviously, when the band was basically sacked, as far as all the research I've done, it was a success of Greece, and Frankie decided, this was his last chance to establish a solo career.
Well, he's got a solo career now.
I know he had. And he went. The other advice I was told, I don't know who told me years ago, was Peter Bennett, the infamous Frankie Valli lawyer, said that if the Four Seasons went out as the Four Seasons, you'd lose the right to the name. I'm not sure whether that was true, but
not true.
I don't think it would be.
Untrue.
They have to take on the management and the cost of.
Untrue. They own the trademark. Period. They own the trademark. It's Library of Congress.
They wouldn't or couldn't finance you further, and there wasn't a record deal from Warner's. So you hung on in there until the reunion, but you had a lot of problems with those solo shows. I've heard from people who saw shows from that time and written, saying that the sound wasn't quite right and you were struggling to get the backing singers to perform the way they needed to. Frankie didn't seem to be happy with it. You were not happy about the creative aspects?
They were digressing. They had rediscovered a sound that caught everyone's ear. Helicon was only one person's album. It was Bob Gaudio's album. None of us, we had creative input. I wrote arrangements, but those songs were in stone when we got there, and there was no participation from anybody other than do this song, do this song, do this song. And I thought it sucked. I just thought it was like white bread. Like it just didn't have. Honestly, Charlie said it best with regard to Sherry, and that when you hear the Jersey Boys bands and they all do Sherry, they're singing all the right notes, but nobody believes it, because when Frankie sang, "Can you come out tonight?" Your heart broke. Come on out tonight, Frankie's going to cry. Come on, the emotional connection is missing, and the emotional connection in Helicon, to me, is non-existent. It's not there. I don't care one word. I don't care one word that's being sung on that album. Yeah. And some of the musicianship that's showcased on that album is fabulous. Some fabulous playing, some great execution. Not one song sticks in my mind, and I don't believe a word of it.
Well, during the late 70s, it's clear that when you were on tour, as this Four Seasons, you were clearly more popular outside the US than inside the US. And I suspect this is because the US is always clearly Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons is the 60s sound.
Correct.
As in Europe and the rest of the world, we were open to new experiences. We were listening for new sounds and variations on the themes. We were open to it, whereas maybe America wasn't.
No, America wasn't, because we're all commerce driven here. The arts is the necessary evil. Commerce is most important. So, and I was taught, Gaudio even said it, if you want to write a hit record, start with one.
Yeah.
So plagiarism, although we didn't call it that, it was like Veronica and Gloria. It was like that.
Yeah.
Oh, this Gloria song by Laura Branigan, that's happening. We can write something like that. Except they got so close that it was a joke to me. But nonetheless, that's why Europe in general, I think, is more about. That's why you guys, frankly, can have an appreciation for songs that I don't. Whatever, because your minds are more open to that fact that it's music, and I'm more geared toward, does it sound like a hit? So I'm a little jaded as an American, because if it don't sound like it's going to be a hit, then it's nice. But whereas you guys can say, I love that, it sounded so great.
Well, it's with music. I mean, we talked about this last week with Charlie. It's not so much the hit making chord structure, but it's the lyric and it's the feel. I think the rest of the guys in this group who talk with you regularly think about the music. Throw it open to the guys. Is it the feel that we got from this album and those days, or is it the lyrics, or what is it that you guys still relate to? Oh, throw it open. Whoever puts a hand up.
I bought the album and I really didn't listen much to it other than Rhapsody.
Helicon, yeah.
Yeah.
Who Loves You? Did you have Who Loves You?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had Who Loves You, and you played that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
the Who Loves You was more of a pop rock, had disco influence, sort of danceable. It was just sort of a happy, rockin' sound.
It was bubble gum. It was hit.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
It was the FM. It was AM radio. That's what it was.
Made
Gaudio's wheelhouse.
Made
And
you
as a
smile.
result, his departure from that was intentional, because he
Yeah.
always felt like he was bubblegummy, and the Grateful Dead were making much more money and had longevity because they were FM radio, and they were like.
That's right. The Helicon album almost seemed like he was going back to the beginnings of FM, underground radio.
That's what he was trying to do.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like.
And he was the guy that said if they liked it the first time, they'll love it the second time. He broke his own rule.
Yeah, it broke his own
He
rule.
should have made more pop hits.
And Who Loves You, not only do I have the LP, but I have the 8-track. So
That interrupts in the middle.
So Chuck, you were a big follower on the West Coast at this time.
That's what's interesting. I find is that there were so many records coming out in the mid '70s from different producers. They all used the same musicians and the same vocalists, same arrangers, same writers. They had just a different title on the album cover. It was the same people. But there were so many out that when you listen to them, something had to stand out for you to be attracted to it. When I got Helicon, it just did not stand out relative to some of the other ones that were available at the time. And there's a couple good songs on Helicon and some creativity, but it was just the Four Seasons at that time, as Lee has pointed out, were perceived as a 60s group.
Well,
and the West Coast scene was more like what's happening today. Let's worry about today and forget about yesterday.
Well, Bob Gaudio was working with Stoneground at the moment, and I mean, I'm sure you all know Stoneground's work. It's it's hugely popular, isn't it?
No, not at all.
No,
Never heard of him.
Exactly. And it wasn't the first time that Bob had sort of fleetingly delved into the rock music scene. He did the same with Light or Lux on the Gazette label, as we know, and with similarly unsuccessful results. So switching between what you do best and what you're known for, as Lee has pointed out before, seems to be an error that can repeat itself.
Yeah.
Lee, what do you think?
I don't know, man. The one thing, Ken, that I've learned is that you don't know about anything till you've done it. You can hear it back, or you can set out to write one thing and ends up being another, and you can give up and find out that the thing you hated is what everybody likes. I can't make sense out of anything anymore.
You don't know how the audience is going to react, and so it's he said in the past, and total credit to Bob Gaudio, because this stuff was amazing. Everything. I won't discredit either anything on Who Loves You or anything on Helicon, because it was an attempt to be where you guys could be. But it doesn't always work, and it's about timing,
Timing is everything.
and luck. So luck struck with Who Loves You, but didn't with Helicon. So
Helicon didn't deserve luck. There was nothing there to hang your hat on. It was all Gaudio's self-indulgence. I call creative self-indulgence. He had the authority to do that. I didn't think it was a good idea just because you could do it. And also, he was very jealous of people like Stevie Wonder playing all the instruments on their record, playing drum parts and all that. He kept trying to do whatever the person was doing instead of being what he was, which was a hit producer. But he was also coming off about 3 bomb albums, so he was hunting and pecking a little too.
Lee, thanks very much for contributing to our analysis of Who Loves You. And before we close down, I'll just see if there's any further questions that anybody's got before we finish.
What, Dom? What?
I have to ask you about Down the Hall. I thought that was a catchy tune. Whose idea was with the kazoo sound?
Probably Gaudio. I don't really recall it because to me it was plagiaristic. I couldn't get into it. She moved in down the hall. What's on?
Well, John Piper, who would have told us if he'd been here, he said, it was just done round the piano, and
yes, it was.
Gaudio played it, and you just sort of improvised around the piano and just turned it into a catchy number and gave it to the record company because they couldn't find a single off the album. That
was exactly why it happened. But as I say, if you were going to buy Silly Love Songs by Paul McCartney or Down the Hall, I don't think there's any. I mean, well, history will tell us who had the hit. I mean, you can't do what's. I mean, you can, but you don't blatantly copy a chord progression and it's the same rhythm on the drums and then just sing another melody.
Or maybe because it was a copy from McCartney, it was a success in the UK because it was a hit. But that's
Down the Hall wasn't a hit anywhere.
It was a hit in the UK.
It was really?
Yeah.
What number? What number?
Oh, in the 30s. In the 30s.
Not a big hit.
It was number 35 with an anchor.
This is non-music question, but I heard an interview by Don Ciccone, and he mentioned that he sang the original lead on Who Loves You, and he said after the song was presented to the Warner Brothers Curb executives, they loved it, so they wanted to sign the Four Seasons, and he said Bob Gaudio told him this, that they liked that song so much they wanted it to be released with Don Ciccone, lead, and they would sign the Four Seasons with Don Ciccone as the lead singer and make Frankie Valli a separate solo. Now, I didn't believe it, but that's what he said.
That would have been what they were talking about was exactly what you're saying, except the lead singer would be Frank, would have been Jerry and Don, both, because they were establishing that in Oh What a Night. That was part of the battle plan. But it was never designed so that Don would replace Frankie as the front man. It was never going to be.
Well, Frankie was already signed to Private Stock at this time.
That's right.
So they wouldn't allow it. And equally so, because you were doing so well with your instrumentals at the time, like Warsaw Concerto, which is...
Warsaw Concerto is another Gaudio hogging it up and blowing a good thing. Because we did the Warsaw Concerto live, and that was the first time Larry Utall ever heard it, was at Central Park. And I had written a dance version, just like Fifth of Beethoven. I did one with Warsaw Concerto. And Larry came, I didn't never heard about it until afterwards. And he came up to Frankie and said, I want to record that. I want that to be the thing. So Frankie said, great. And then he told me, great. And then we went in the studio and we were doing a disco version of Brian's song.
Brian's song, yeah.
And so,
it was actually recorded.
Yeah, and we recorded it, and it sounded great, but what was the point? So we did it, and Frankie said, "Yeah, we're going to do this instead of Warsaw Concerto, which we think it's a better thing." And the word came back from Larry Utah, said, "What the fuck is this? Where's my Warsaw Concerto?" And that was the end of that. And that happened more than once to me with the seasons, but my career is what it is, and I'll take it.
Well, yeah, but Privates. I also read an interview where Private Stock stopped it from happening, or Warner Curb stopped it from happening, one or the other, because commercially they didn't want the competition.
Well, and also, if I was one of the Four Seasons, what was I doing coming out with a record that had no vocals on it, and that was the
Exactly.
Four Seasons Orchestra?
Exactly. We were all excited about it at the time, but fortunately, 4 tracks from it, from your instrumental arrangements, have survived and are in the box set. So if you don't get a copy by next week, because Guardio and Valli have got their copies of the box set.
Oh, so Guardio called you to say thank you?
No, he didn't.
Oh, what a surprise.
No, Mark's just opened my box set, haven't you, Mark?
Yeah, in the massive box.
But wait, did Bob Guardio call you to thank you for it?
No, he hasn't had any thanks whatsoever. And but the important thing is that we did it.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah,
what
that's
we're
an
going
accomplishment.
What we're going to do in subsequent sessions, and if there's anybody in this group who hasn't got isn't getting a copy, then let me know now, because we're going to review it, Lee.
Wait, whoever is there, I'll give you $100 to forfeit your copy.
To what?
I'll give you $100 to forfeit your copy so that I can get 2 copies.
Well, I nearly got 2 copies because DHL failed 4 times to deliver it last week. So I rang Snapper, and I had to get another delivery company to send it, and it came next day. But then the guy rings me from Liverpool and says, "All right, mate, I got your box set here, the package here. I'm trying to deliver it to you." I said, "Too late, man. Too late." I should have said, "Oh, cool. Yes, deliver it tomorrow."
What you should have said is send it to Lee Shapiro.
Hey, Mark, that box was so big. I thought they included Frankie with the CDs.
I don't know if you've seen the grand opening, but somebody chose to do a YouTube video of it, and so we published it on Facebook today, and it's out there for all the fans to see. So
well, it's still sealed, the one that for you.
Yeah.
Lovely, very classily, very stylishly done.
What's the insider price?
Oh, well, the insider price is $435.
What's the outsider price?
Well, they're saying that if they sell the 2,500 copies, then the price will probably rise on eBay to something like $550.
But I'm talking about the inside price to people like me and Dom.
Oh,
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
How much am I going to pay for it wholesale?
Snapper should send it to you free. But
what do you mean they should? Why don't you see to it? I know the president of the company, Ken.
I'll drop an email.
I want 2 copies. Period. I want to discuss it.
Well,
He's going to sell me 1 copy.
I want 2 copies.
Bucks.
Dom, $3.95, Dom.
Oh wow, that's a deal.
Hey, guys,
Does it come with a Hitman hat that I'm
I can
still
beat
missing?
I can beat that price.
yeah.
I got mine from Collector's Choice here in the States, and with the discount structure they've got, I paid I think $382 for my box.
Oh
delivered.
my God.
Wow.
I wouldn't pay $382 if I came to your house.
Well, I know that, but you would if I delivered it.
You don't want to read my collector's notes?
I want you to send me 2 copies, Ken. 2
Okay.
copies. I know Karen Suberth personally.
I only want 1, Ken. I'm not greedy.
I'm greedy.
He's greedy. I'm not.
And
He's
wait,
Jersey. I'm
wait.
from Queens.
I want 1 copy because you were going to give me that anyway. And I want a second copy because this Wednesday I turned 70.
Oh my
70.
God.
Oh, boy.
70. 70. I can't even get it out. 70.
Wow.
Lee, you're very fortunate to reach that age. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to turn 76. So,
Whoa.
Wow.
yeah. So you've got a bit to catch up on me yet.
Yeah,
But
me
Let's
too.
keep it that way. Keep it that way.
So thank you, everybody. It's been a fun way to end. So I'll wind it up there and say thank you to you all for joining us, particularly Lee.
Oh, my pleasure always to dominate one of these sessions.
Give us all the information when you were there. You were in the zone. You were
Our
live on
fourth
stage.
season.
It's
Our
still
fourth
hard to
season.
believe. It's just hard to believe that it meant as much as it does mean. At the time I was doing it, didn't occur to me. You
The
know?
question is, do you know that girl who's behind you on the screen with the fancy suit on?
Yeah, who was that?
Who
You
was
know,
that?
honestly, no, I don't, and that's another thing we had no say in. And the reason that girl is dancing in his hand and the eyes and all that is for Mystic Mr. Sam dancing in his hand with his big. But
It's a bit dark, Lee. I have to say, it's a bit dark.
it's ridiculous. But you know what? There are people that make all the wrong moves and win anyway, and that would be these guys. They do things that don't look like they have a chance, and boom. So my hat's off to them. I respect them greatly.
Okay.
I was supposed to see Frankie tonight, but it was canceled
And a flu.
Yeah.
due to the flu. But this is the second best thing that could have happened to me today. Thank you.
And look at the money you save.
Yeah, really. Well, no, I went through StubHub, had an argument with them, and it rescheduled till November. I said, I'm probably not going to be in the United States in November. Who knows?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Okay.
Everybody, I love you all. Thank you so much.
Love you back. Love you back.
We'll talk soon.
You
Be good,
guys,
everybody.
take care.
Good to see you guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Cheers.
Happy birthday.